All right, folks. Um, my think tank sent me, well, my email think tank, my new think tank sent me something that I thought was interesting because we've been talking about this. Me and Cerulean been talking about this for 2 years, and I've been talking about this for about 10. But online, I've been talking about this for about the last 4 years. So you're probably familiar with what I'm saying about white supremacy, seeing its ebbing and coming to its natural conclusion and making way for other things, right? So I was sent an article from Zero Hedge, actually through Paul Craig Roberts, talking about this very same thing. And so there's a couple of blog posts by Paul Craig Roberts that I actually wanted to actually highlight. So I'm going to do them in separate videos. So this is just the first one. And then I'm going to do the one that was in Zero Hedge and kind of doing them separately. But Paul Craig Roberts is actually an economist under the Treasury in Ronald Reagan's administration. And though he's a Republican, he was a staunch conservative. And over time, he's starting to lean toward the middle, which is a little bit more liberal. Because a lot of your libertarians and a lot of your liberals actually use Paul Craig Roberts. So I would say he's a moderate. And he's pretty level-headed because he's an economist. So to hear him say something like, what he's saying is shocking almost. Not, shocking, because he is, he's a staunch libertarian. And he's not a Klan member, or he's not a white identitarian or anything like that. He's level-headed. He's an administrator. So what he's saying in these two blog posts is actually going to be amazing. That's how come I actually want to actually go through it and then go through the other one and get your take on it. Anyway, let's go ahead and go through this article. Paul Craig Roberts, Whiteness is the New Evil. And he's talking about the blog post, New York public school teachers ordered to favor black children over white children, which is interesting. I probably have to go back and actually see what that's about. You do that in a later date. Whiteness is the new evil. The assault on whiteness is now part of an official educational policy. Remember, when you want to socialize the population, you start with the children. In New York City, the head of the education department, Richard Carranza, a son of Mexican immigrants, is conducting a campaign against toxic white supremacy culture. Very interesting. His training program for teachers identifies objectivity, individualism, belief in meritocracy. Get this, see that? Belief in meritocracy. And a Protestant work ethic as manifestations of white supremacy that have to be rooted out of the education system. Carranza says that these white values constitute a deep-rooted bigotry. Carranza dismisses whites who object to his portrayal of their values as racial biases as defensive of white supremacy culture to get rid of whiteness. Carranza has fired numerous white education department officials. Again, we're going to have to investigate this further. You guys can go to the post and actually see the links in the description, because I haven't seen both sides of the story. You can't completely trust white people when they say that somebody's a lunatic. Clearly, white liberals are once again the victims of their delusions. They took a Mexican immigrant, gave him a public school and university education, made him superintendent of Houston Public Schools, then put him in charge of New York City schools at $345,000 annual salary, only to have him dismantle their policy of colorblindness and replace it with identity politics. Now, white people don't do something for just no reason, so there has to be something based behind it. There's something behind this. I have my ideas, but let's continue. Carranza intends to liberate people from their inherent insidiousness of white culture, replace it with fact-based knowledge, and replace fact-based knowledge with emotional-based knowledge. A lot of this is white feminist teaching. In other words, the diversity and multiculturalism for which white liberals were advocates have now turned against white culture and welcome them. White kids in New York public schools are to be herded to the back of the bus. I don't think that's true. Well, that remains to be seen. The attack on whiteness doesn't differentiate between white genders. All whites are the enemy. But white males get a double dose of hate because women have turned on them also. Again, we see who white women actually voted for. They voted for Trump, and actually they're also behind the anti-abortion bill. So white women turn it on white men. I don't think that's true. But continuing. Thus, there is disunity amongst the white genders, leaving whites unable to present a common front against their opponents. I told you he was libertarian, right? Illinois State Representative Diana Pappas says the solution to unwanted pregnancies and abortions is to castrate men. The men would have no option prior to the castration, having their semen stored, so that there was a decision to have children that the semen could be taken out of storage. If you're going to castrate them, what do you need their sperm for? But that's this is interesting. This is an interesting article, interesting post. Laura Carlson, a gender consultant and women's advocate, writes in Counterpunch that white describes a racism directed at non-white peoples. Very true. And nationalism refers to the territorial aspirations of whites for their own country. White males, Carlson claims, have a meticulously cultivated sense of entitlement to women in their wombs to pump out blue-eyed babies. Ku Klux Klan, neo-Confederate, neo-Nazi, racist skinhead, Christian identity, and anti-Semitic, anti-immigrant are characteristics of white nationalism. Well, that's accurate. It is okay for Jews, blacks, and Asians and Hispanics to have their own countries, but not for white Gentile. You do have them, but it's called Europe. It's called countries in Europe. The insanity that has taken over in the United States is also ensconced in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Europe. For example, the president of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, has denounced British, French, German, Italian, Hungarian, Polish, and other Europeans as stupid nationalists who are in love with their own countries. Instead of this ethnic selfishness, Europeans should welcome massive non-European immigration and cease to exist as a unified ethnic nationalities. You're doing that anyway. Because you don't have enough people. Even Russians, RT's publishing it, but even there, they have to import 300,000 more people. In France, as in most of Europe, it is dangerous for a person of French ethnicity to utter a critical word about black or Arab immigrants. The fact that the white governments have taken the side of non-white migrants against their own white citizens has emboldened non-white migrants in acts of violence and hatred toward European whites. For example, in France, the black rapper Nick Conrad has made videos of himself rapping, I fuck France, I burn France, as he symbolically strangles a white woman representing France. Now that's interesting. You have to look him up. Try to imagine in this racial reverse, in racial reverse, with a white man symbolically strangling a black woman. Well, we have seen that. According to this report, the Daily Stormer, I fuck France, I burn France, rapper violates, the video preaching racial hatred has not been taken down by Facebook, YouTube, Apple, or Twitter, which proves that the often made point that the new world order of identity politics only white people can be guilty of hate speech. That's bullshit. I get stricken all the time. But here's the last part that's interesting. And after this, I will make my commentary if I haven't already. This is the part that stuck with me. It is a most amazing thing that the exceptional people of the indispensable country, who according to the Zionist neoconservatives deserve to exercise hegemony over the world, are unable to exercise hegemony in their own country. That is a fascinating quote. I'm going to pull that quote. I'm going to save this quote by Paul Craig Roberts, because this is actually going to come to fruition, in my opinion. It is a most amazing thing that the exceptional people, this is white supremacy, of the indispensable country, which is the United States, who according to the Zionist neoconservatives deserve to exercise hegemony or rulership over the world, are unable to exercise hegemony in their own country. Even he recognizes this. What he's mourning, and Quigley actually mourned that in 1976. He mourned the fact that white supremacy or white European values were going to go down the tube. And he says it's a tragedy that there was nothing that he could do about it. He actually said that. Quigley was not a anti-American or anti-white scholar. But Quigley knew the facts on the ground. He knew he could predict to a certainty what was going to happen, because history repeats itself. And history was repeating itself right in front of his very eyes. And he knew that European nationalism and European hegemony had run its course. And I had said, just like with Thanos, Endgame, where they're passing the torch, or they're passing on the mantle to other groups of people. Because if you notice in Endgame, after Thanos was gone, after the Thanos snap, all the white superheroes passed the mantle on to other groups of people. In other words, white hegemony or white Western civilization, the mantle is being passed on to other groups of people, and there's nothing they can do about it, because they've crossed over. In other words, their history has come to an end in a sense. In other words, what they could do has been passed over. In other words, there's nothing they can do about progress, and we probably have to go into greater detail. That probably would have to be a Patreon video where we actually really go into the greater detail about it, because I'm gonna have to bring in a whole bunch of other elements, and that's probably way too long and way too boring to the vast majority of people on YouTube. So that's probably more like a Patreon video that I probably have to produce, because there's other elements I actually want to put into it that would actually go into it, so people can actually understand. For some people to understand, some people aren't going to get it until it actually happens, and then as they see it, they can actually bring in the elements. But this is, if you look at demographics, man, if you look at demographics, if you look at the spread of of technology, not just the spread, but the spread of technology, but also the rest of the world actually coming up to where the Europeans are, to where the gap, where not only the gap has been closed, but if you look at China, China surpassed them and running away. They no longer have a lead, and they no longer have an advantage. Now with population, weapons, technology, they don't have an advantage. Their advantages are gone. So they're holding on to what is left, and I think they're trying to include other identities and make them one of us, make us one of them, rather than trying to hold back the hordes, the barbarians that are at the gate. And I think even Paul Craig Roberts is recognizing this, and you're gonna see it further in the next video, because like I said, I'm not gonna put these together. I'm actually gonna make these separate. But this is very, very telling, and this is not a man that is a staunch, hardcore liberal, or even though he can sound like it, a staunch, hardcore racist. He is a white person and unabashedly proud to be a white person. He's proud of white civilization, and he can see the handwriting on the wall. Very, very telling. Very, very telling. But with that, I'm going to end this one, close this one out, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.